song that just kind of helps remind me who I am and what I'm doing. I need that frequently and often. But maybe you'll be able to relate. I am finding my divinity in the light of everyone's love. I am finding my divinity in the light of everyone's love. Everyone's love, everyone's love, in the light of everyone's love. Everyone's love, everyone's love, in the light of everyone's love. You are finding your divinity in the light of everyone's love. You are finding your divinity in the light of everyone's love. Everyone's love, everyone's love, in the light of everyone's love. Everyone's love, everyone's love, in the light of everyone's love. We are finding our divinity in the light of everyone's love. We are finding our divinity in the light of everyone's love. Everyone's love, everyone's love, in the light of everyone's love. Everyone's love, everyone's love, in the light of everyone's love. You know, that's a little ditty. I should have sang it once or twice before I got here. But thanks for enjoying it with me. Okay. So, one of the reasons why I sang that song, because this is one of those talks that I've been working on like all week long and all day yesterday, and trying to write and trying to get kind of clear on what it is I was trying to say exactly. And I try to put all these pieces, you know, I read too much, I try to put all these pieces together, and I just start swimming around in all this stuff. And, Spencer, do you have a watch?
Yes.
Okay, so when it gets to be about 15 minutes or so into this, start jumping up and down and waving, let me know. Okay, thank you. So yeah, so you know, I write too much, you gotta cut it. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And I want to talk about how this religion works, specifically more how we develop our attunement and how we develop the skill of discernment to know when it's spirit communicating and working with us, rather than perhaps our imagination or my girlfriend, who's new to anything really kind of religious. When I first met her, I didn't think we were going to get along. She's kind of one of those folks, has a knee-jerk reaction against anything kind of Christian sounding. I think the proselytizers got to her once too often, but I kind of explained, well, it's not like that, and she actually met my teacher, Reverend Millie, before she passed, and she's been to some spiritualist circles, and so her interest got piqued a little bit. So it's kind of a big question. How does it work, and you know, what do you do in order to develop the ability to tune in? And it's like a big elephant, you know, where do you start on that thing? So first I do want to say a couple of things. I want to ask your indulgence and forgiveness and humor me if I start to kind of talk about myself here. That's my frame of reference I've got to kind of answer a lot of these things, like anybody does. But if it sounds anywhere along the way like I'm bragging, I'm not, certainly not trying to. And if it sounds at times like I'm embarrassing myself, I probably am, but humor me anyway. All right. So when I talk, I like to, I kind of aim to do one concept. Talks that have like all this stuff thrown at you, and you leave and you kind of wonder what they say. If you can kind of limit it to one concept, and I like that Toastmasters idea. Tell them what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you said, and then they might remember. So I'm going to endeavor to do that. So you ask myself, what is the main point? The main point is the main point. What is it? And before I tell you that, I want to mention, I guess, what makes me qualified to talk today. I'm not a minister, but I have been hanging around ministers for a long time. I've been practicing, I've been healing. That's my natural gift of spirit, is healing. But anybody can develop all of the gifts, and I've done some platform reading, and I've got a pretty extensive background, as you'll hear more, in different spiritual paths. And I do want to thank you for inviting me. Yeah, you do know me and have for a long time, so that's a pretty good recommendation. And Reverend Rosie, thank you, and thank you all for having me. So, I'll kind of jump right into it here. The answer to the question, how it works and how do you develop your skills and how do you encourage spirit to work with you? You do it in community. You have to do it. You don't have to do it. There are people that are naturally just born gifted mediums and in tune and are able to communicate. There are people, I understand, that are living their life one day and the next day they wake up and all of a sudden they've got this ability. That does happen. But for a lot of us, the more common way of doing it is the slow educational variety, where you kind of have to show up and the universe commences an educational process and you have to practice it. So community is the quick, down and dirty answer to the question. How many people here, believe in angels, and how many people here think that they're angels? And let me give you the idea of a bubble of God. Everybody knows what that is, right?
Bubble of God?
A bubble of God? A bubble of God is a little soul. Little souls running around, you, me, angels, spirit, space aliens, everybody, even animals, are little bubbles of God, little essences of God. I mean, that's all God had to work with when He created everything, was Himself. So it stands to reason that we're all little bubbles of God. Now, what we call angels, I mean, there's a lot of fancy definitions if you go to the seminary, but basically, if you think of angels as being bubbles of God that have a light body, as opposed to humans on the planet, bubbles of God who have a physical body. Essentially, though, they is us, we is them. So keep that in mind as I go on. So how did I come up with this idea that community is the answer to developing our spiritual attunement? And everybody knows what I'm talking about with spiritual attunement concept. Basically, spiritualism is kind of unique in that we practice, we believe, and we practice communicating with spirit, angels, bubbles of God, whatever you might want to call them, that are on the other side of the veil. And it's fairly simple. You know, God energy, you know, never dies. It doesn't get destroyed. Einstein told us, you know, physical form just kind of changes. Matter is energy. Energy is matter. It goes back and forth. So our actual body form might change, but the essence of our soul and who we are is continuous. And when you're on the earth, you know, you're wandering around and you're having a good time and you're making these connections with people, and you find a sense of love for people, and when you die, you don't stop loving people. The people that you loved when you were alive, you still love them. And if you had a way, you'd really actually like to reach down and communicate with them, talk to them, if you could. And some people that have this gift, this mediumship ability, are able to actually talk to them, and there's a exchange of information and love, and so that's kind of the basics of the spiritualism religion. All right. So I'm going to get right into this. So I kind of came out of this whole experience from a time of deep depression, which I've had most of my life. But when I was a teenager, it was really kind of awful. And you know, I had spent a lot of time. You know, my household was not so nurturing and welcoming, and so I spent a lot of time like walking away from it, around it, outside. But I kind of got this message at home. You know, I had an older brother who, you know, when we needed blood for the microscope, it was my blood. You know, he was like most older brothers, you know, your little brother's, you know, just an idiot, can't do anything. And my mom was kind of bitter and emotional and had her own stuff going on. My dad wasn't around, so it was easier for me to just not be around a whole lot too. But I actually got to a spot of being suicidal, and I kind of made this half-hearted attempt to do myself in, and it wasn't enough to actually do anything, but it was enough to make myself sick. And what it really was enough to do was, for the first time, spirits showed up. These three men came around me, and they basically told me that you know, they didn't want me leaving, that my task was to stay here on the planet, and they kind of made me agree to this. And they were very, very kind of like, you know, heavy duty, important. You didn't want to argue with these people. And then their parting word to me was, you know, why don't you try participating in life? Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. So I actually started to do a little of that. Started to play some guitar, and started to get involved in school, and started to participate. And life got more fun. Started to join groups and find little communities. Life got much better. Okay, let's fast forward. I divorced my wife, the only daughter of an Assemblies of God minister. Pretty fundamentalist girl, real bright, real pretty, but I couldn't quite assimilate into that world the way that seemed like it was supposed to. My job transferred me down here to San Diego from Washington. And all of a sudden my spiritual life just exploded. And I'll kind of just quickly mention some of the things that I got into. Native American spirituality was one of them. I met a number of medicine men and was invited to go up on the hill in South Dakota Bear Butte and do a vision quest. And I participated, in a number of these Yuwipi ceremonies. Went out for a sun dance. I, didn't do the dance, but supported this vision quest thing. I want to just explain it a little bit. It was one of the biggest instances of spirit showing up in my life. And I had been going to Fraternal Spiritualist Church for a while and stuff, so I'm doing this thing up there for 3 days, 3 days, 3 nights, no food, no water. You sit up there and you just kind of like pray. And you got prayer ties around, and the medicine man is praying for you down below, and you pray. And these big, dark, thundering clouds from the west, the thunder beings from the Black Hills to the west, would kind of coalesce and they'd blow over towards the hill where I was at. And a couple of days before I actually went up on the hill, I was there during this rainstorm, and these big, fat, cold, wet raindrops just came plummeting out of the sky. And the people that were up there on the hill at that time just got soaked. Mm-hmm. And I mean soaked and cold to the point where you're kind of so cold. No, I didn't want to get like that. I just lived in terror of that. So every time these clouds would come and thunder would start happening, and I'd think, oh no, this is it. And I'd take my little sleeping bag, and I'd stuff it in a little stuff sack, and I'd put it between my legs, and I'd sit here, and I'd just kind of like, Well, this went on 3 or 4 times a day for 3 days. Well, finally, I got to the spot where I just kind of screamed, God, and the grandfathers and thunder beings, screamed at him and just was righteously indignant, and at that time, the sun, I'm on a hill, I'm looking down, the sun sets behind me, and the sun, all of a sudden, its light beams that were on top of these clouds, and everything was kind of dark and shadowy, are now underneath these clouds. And the light is hitting this green pasture grass down there, and everything is like fluorescent green and bright and beautiful. And I'm looking, and I see these 2 little shimmering lights. And if you know about the ways sometimes spirit will manifest visually as might I say, shimmering bodies of light. I see this happening, and while this is happening, I distinctly am hearing this voice saying to me, I need to learn to look beyond the surface appearances, that there's at least 2 sides to everything. And then he said in parentheses, actually, in reality, there's many more sides, but we keep it simple for you humans, and we just give you 2 sides. But they said, learn to look beyond the surface appearances of things. So, and then while that's happening, of course, these beings, these thunder beings that are shivering there, they turn into, they put these nice colored robes on, and it turns into a beautiful rainbow. And, they kind of let me know that, things can be threatening and things can be destructive, and we have a tendency to want to think of God and spirit as all butterflies and rainbows. But there is that thunderous, change is going to happen, tear it down in order to rebuild it aspect of God too. And there's nothing wrong with either aspect. They are both legitimate good aspects of creation and of God, and come to terms with it. And not only that, but when you see something that's scary, frightening, ugly, whatever, look a little beyond it. Look beyond the surface appearance and see the flip side, the other side, the good side. Okay. So I'm always trying to learn how to do that. So the Native Americans, it's a funny path too. Native American, not all of it I suppose, but the seven rituals of the Lakota tribes, very much into, they kind of believe they have nothing to offer God but their body. and they're kind of into suffering, and they make a deal with God that, you know, I'll suffer, or I'll, you know, hang myself from a tree, or, you know, I'll go 3 days, 3 nights, or 4 days, you know, without food and water, in order to kind of like get your attention and, you know, do business with you. And when I came back from this, I shared this whole experience with my Reverend Millie. I got done telling her all this, and she's just not into any of this stuff at all. She just doesn't get it. She says to me, "Dennis, don't you know that you can find God with your feet up on the coffee room table?" and yeah, she's right. But anyway, I got into a lot of yoga stuff along the way. I did a bunch of Iyengar yoga. I actually did a lot and still do, and was teaching Kundalini yoga for 4 or 5 years. There's 22 different kinds of yoga, different forms and techniques and things. And they are all individually. If you just did nothing but that, people have done that and reached enlightenment. People have done nothing but just done pranayama yoga, breathing technique. Boom, they're there. People have done the physical stuff and they'll get there. I really like the yoga of sound and vibration, mantras and chanting and sound, singing. So I kind of got exposed myself and learned a little bit about the Hindu way of doing things, even a little bit of the mythology and stuff, but and sacred dance. I got into doing Sufi dancing. Dance is a universal peace, is what it's known as, and devotional singing. But moving meditations are just wonderful. Get you out of your body and get you to a place, and especially if you do it in a community with other people. Lots of fun. Okay, so the Christian stuff, I did a lot of that, and you know, it's a little frustrating. You try to figure out, how can I be righteous 51% of the time, you know, just enough to kind of be good enough to get into heaven. How do you do that? And they kind of let you know that, no, you can't do that. There's no way to do that. You're kind of inherently flawed. And you know, but you know, Jesus has done what the Indians have done, and you know, he hung himself on the tree and he suffered for us, and you're okay, you know, if you believe. And okay, it didn't quite work for me as far as getting the fullness of a sense of spirit and communion. You know, since then, and since I got done, you know, it's kind of like elementary school Christianity, and when you make that jump to graduate level Christianity, where you're talking about the actual saints and Christian mystics and people that are living their relationship with God and a Christian perspective, it's lo and behold, it's a valid way to find God, and it's a legitimate path. Another path I got involved in, I didn't mention that I stopped drinking 35 years ago, and I did it largely with the AA program. It's a great little program, partly because in their book they have a chapter that's entitled "How It Works," so you don't have to be given a talk about how it works. They have a book with a chapter, "How It Works," and the actual steps are numbered, so you just do them in number. Very simple. Not easy to do though, very hard to do. In fact, the only way you can do it is in the community and have a sponsor, an experienced person kind of like teach you and walk you through it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, where are we at, Spencer? Okay?
It's
Okay.
20 minutes.
Well, okay. So, I want to tell you a little bit about my sister. My sister is 2 years younger than me, and she's living her life. She got throat cancer, and insurance companies and medical industry. Anyway, she ended up having to prepare to die, and she was scared. She wasn't like prepared to do any of this. So, I and my brother, we did a crash course in spiritualism, and let her know kind of like what was happening, what to expect, and planted the seeds that this was going to be a good thing. And at her funeral, we were raised Lutheran. They had this Lutheran minister there who was leading this service, and he comes out, "Death is a thief." Well, me and the hospice nurses and stuff, and we kind of like, well, it's not a thief from our perspective. And my sister had told us in the process of dying that, Spirit was coming to her and was greeting her and reassuring her, and she understood that she wasn't going to be going, alone somewhere, and that she was going to be greeted, and that, life was going to continue just as wonderful or more so on that side of the veil as it has on this side of the veil. And I'm really happy to say after she died, she came back in circle and told me that everything I told her was right and was accurate. So that was good validation. Yeah. But so I'd like to talk a little bit more about that idea of death being a gift. But I've worked with, I used to do some chaplaincy work, and I was a hospice volunteer. And when you have somebody that's actually lived their life fully and feel like they've done what they were supposed to do in life and fulfilled their life purpose, and they don't have a whole lot of trepidation and fear and, oh my gosh, terrible stuff about the experience. Unlike my mother, who just had a terrible time. But, if death is really hard for people that haven't fully lived their life. But if you've lived your life, it's not such a bad thing. So why is this community idea so important? It's in AA they talk about one alcoholic talking to another, passing on the wisdom they've learned. In spiritualism, I like to talk about one angel talking to another, one bubble of God talking to another. And usually it's the angels, the spirit that's on the other side of the veil, they're a little step ahead of us. And they're attracted to us by likeness, but they know a little bit more than us. Not a whole lot. They're not going to blow us out of the water with stuff that we just positively can't understand and not ready to. But they're one step above, and they can come back and they can teach us and guide us and inspire us and love us. They're kind of like emissaries of God. So, and then in community, those of us, the angels on this side, that are a little bit more, we have teachers and pastors that teach us and guide us and kind of explain. You guys know what spiritual circles are? Really, most of you do, basically we're talking seance here. And how to develop the ability to kind of like tune into, who's there, what they want to say, and why. So the way that works, of course, is they're attracted by likeness, your vibration. So if your vibration is kind of, let's just say alcoholic-y, then you're not attracting the highest, most inspired and enlightened spiritual entities out there. But if you have a pretty good vibration of care and kindness and love and concern for others, basically, if you're able to and practicing loving others, bubbles of God, the smart and advancement, they really like that. They're attracted to that. And their primary job is they take it on among themselves to come here and let's teach you how you can do more of that. Learning how to love yourself and love others. So, and learning to love yourself is, we kind of end up having a false self-image or a false self-identity. We grow up not knowing who we are. Many of us don't know that we're bubbles of God. That's a real liability in life. I want to tell you, we don't have that problem. But so they come and they work with you and they show you instances of the continuity of life and the continuity of the universal field out there. And they let you know that you're a part of the tapestry of creation, and a very important part of it. The tapestry of creation can't do it without you. Little bubble God. Okay. So Spirit works with you, and you get to a spot pretty soon where you're no longer wandering around kind of like believing and having faith that God loves you and will take care of you. You kind of get to where you know that Spirit's got your back, that there's a big guardian angel there that's going to be available to get you out of jams, find things for you, basically perform the grace of God kind of duties and do for you what you can't do for yourself. It's nice to know that you've got that backing. So you begin to know that you know. And when that happens, you begin to think, well, this love stuff's pretty good. And you begin to practice more of it. And you begin to notice connections. And you practice love, and you get a tenfold return of love back. And you share God's stories amongst each other. Little stories where, God, Spirit, angels did something for you that you couldn't do for yourself. There's little ones, there are big ones. And they're life-changing. And it's so wonderful when you get people together and you tell your God stories, and the enthusiasm and the energy and the gratitude that, the person telling the story has, you get that excitement and happiness and gratitude, and that increases your love volume and your light and attracts more. Pretty soon you get a ball roll. So, you can only do that in community, though. It's hard to do that all by yourself. It can happen, but community is where it happens. Even when we don't know it, we're all God's hands, God's fingers, let's say. God's a verb. He's not a noun, not a person. He's a verb. He's active and doing things, loving. And a lot of times we're used by Spirit and we don't even know it. And I had a fun little thing happen a couple of weeks ago. A woman that I knew 15 years ago from spiritualist class wrote a book, and I saw it on Facebook, and I wrote a little thing about how great this was and what a bright woman and what a great book this has got to be. And she wrote back, your copy's in the mail. And great. I have not talked to her for 15 years, and I didn't really know her a whole lot, but I knew her well enough to know she was bright and talented and had a lot to offer in life. And in the front of the page, she writes, Dennis, you saw this so many years ago. Now it begins. Love, Nancy. Okay, and then I get to the preface, page 13. The first line on the first page of the book. 15 years ago, my friend Dennis O'Donnell and I were sitting on the grass in Mission Bay. Now, I don't get listed 5 words into a book very often. And it's really quite perplexing to me how she even remembered my name. Not only that, she spelled it right. But something that I said seemed to at least water the seed that she already had. She knew she was going to write a book, but anyway, I was just really impressed that somehow I warranted being noticed. There's another time where Spirit used me, and I didn't really know, at the time the Spirit was using me, but and this is just by way of example. The Spirit is using all of us, all of the time, oftentimes, to do things. She writes in this book, to Dennis, a friend of my restoration. And then she goes on and says, she quotes a Bible verse, I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. So, and I don't know, I didn't do anything special other than just love the woman, but it apparently had a big impact. So some of these instances, I'm always taken by that blind beggar guy who sat outside the temple gates, outside Jerusalem, his whole life. He was born blind, sat out there. Everybody that went in and out of the temple, for years and years and years, past this guy, everybody knew him, knew he was blind. And then one day Jesus comes by, picks up some dirt, spits in it, makes a little mud, puts it on his eyes, tells him to go wash it off. And all of a sudden, the guy can see. And the next thing you know, he gets requested to appear in front of the authorities, and they want to know just exactly what went down and see the situation for themselves. And he says basically, I don't know what happened. I didn't ask for anything, but this guy came by, spit in my eye, and now I can see. And doesn't say what he did after that, but he presumably went on. I kind of picture the man, having fulfilled his entire life's mission in that 15 minutes of fame, making that assertion and, witnessing as to what happened to him and what Jesus had done. So that happens. That kind of stuff happens to us all the time in greater or lesser degrees. So we are connected, whether we're aware of it or not. And in community, when we get together as a group and consciously decide we want to work together and help each other grow in our love volume, in our enthusiasm for each other, in our ability to connect with the more full experience of creation. And there's a whole lot of other stuff I'd like to go into. I could have some of the prophecy and channeling and healing, message bearing. One of my favorite things I learned in class is doing things from your love socket. A lot of times, even when you're trying to manifest, God, please give me. Or if you're healing somebody, if you can get that life energy that is in your chakra that yoga talks about, and stir it up and get to that love socket and pronounce, ask for, make your requests with that kind of energy and enthusiasm, things happen. If any of you guys have ever actually, the first time you woke up in jail, you probably had a few moments of that, like, oh God, you get real serious and you put a lot of energy behind your thoughts and your prayers. And that's just an example. Lots of other ways it can happen. But, vibrational energy, learning how to just calm the monkey mind down so you can get to that still spot where you can hear the still small voice. All that stuff is like how it works, but not going to try to go there. Because it starts with the main thing. The main thing is working together as a group in community And the community rather quickly will begin to convince you that you're loved and secure and wanted. They'll begin to mirror back to you that you are a divine being. And you begin to mirror back to them and express the love and show the love, and they begin to understand and change the view of themselves from some flawed, impotent, creature to being a divine being. And that's when life gets real interesting and real fun. We're good, Spencer?
No, it's like
it's
12
late.
o'clock, our service is
Yeah.
supposed to end. He's got
Okay.
50 announcements.
All right.
All kinds of neat stuff.
That's good. Just let me know.
We did,
You just
letting you know.
Okay.
Got it.
Last quick thing. I'm done now. Yeah. You didn't jump up and down.
That's all right.
You know what? I will just say, the church here has just got a new board, and it's got good momentum going, and this is the kind of community where, the support is real, and the dedication to supporting everybody is real. And I do want to say, the religion of spiritualism is so unique because exactly of that actual bona fide first-person experience. We're not relying upon some priest to tell us anything about it. We're not reading it in a book. And it's so unique. And I just want to encourage you to keep the religion of spiritualism as the main thing. There's a lot of New Age churches, and there's a lot of stuff, and that's all good. But there's a lot of places already doing that. There's not a lot of places doing the religion of spiritualism.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And now it's time for announcements with Udoka Nwana, our new vice president.